From a dress that fooled the entire internet to stares that will make you question reality. Here are 10 optical illusions that will trick your eyes. No. 1. The dress. In 2015, a Scottish woman named Celia Wade posted a photo of herself wearing a strange black and blue dress on Tumblr. She asked her followers what they saw when they looked at the dress. Some said they saw black and blue, while others said they saw white and gold. The dress was actually black and blue, but because of the lighting in the photo, some people's brains interpreted the pixels as white and gold instead. This was one of the most popular discussions on the internet for weeks, with over 11 million people voting in a poll about the color of the dress. Scientists believe that there are multiple factors that influence how we perceive colors. The wavelength of light that hits our retinas, the amount of light available in the scene, and our past experiences all play a role. There's even a scientific term for this phenomenon called the dress illusion, and researchers are still trying to figure out exactly why it happens. So next time you see an ambiguous photo online, be careful not to get too sucked into the illusion. You might end up looking like an idiot if you start arguing with people who see things differently than you do. Number 9. After images. Have you ever looked at a bright light and then seen an image of what you were looking at when you looked away? This is called an after image, and it happens because our brains take a little bit of time to adjust to changes in brightness. When you stare at a bright light, the cells in your retina become overstimulated and they stop responding. Then when you look away, the cells have to recover before they can respond to the new image in front of you. In the meantime, you see an after image of what you were just looking at. After images can also be caused by staring at a particular color for too long. If you stare at a red dot for a few seconds and then look away, you'll see a green after image. This is because the cells in your brain that process red and green are being stimulated in different ways. When you stare at the red dot, the cells that process red are being overstimulated, so they become less responsive. The cells that process green then become more responsive. So when you look away, you see a green after image. Our brains do this to help us process the world around us. When we stare at something for too long, our brains take a break to avoid becoming overstimulated. So if you ever see an after image, know that it's just your brain taking a little bit of time to rest. No. 8. The rotation illusion. Have you ever noticed that when you spin a wheel or a fan, the spokes seem to disappear for a moment when they're perfectly vertical or horizontal? This is called the rotation illusion, and it happens so our brains have a hard time processing objects that are rotating quickly. When the spokes of the wheel are vertical or horizontal, they don't provide any visual cues to help us judge how fast they're rotating. So our brains just make an educated guess. They guess that the wheel is rotating slowly enough that we shouldn't be able to see any spokes that are perfectly vertical or horizontal. So they send signals to the parts of our eyes that control our vision to ignore those parts of the wheel. But of course, the wheel is actually rotating quickly, and there are spokes that are perfectly vertical or horizontal. We just can't see them. Researchers aren't exactly sure why this happens, but they think it has to do with the way our brains process visual information. Our brains are always trying to simplify what we see, so they ignore the parts of an image that they think aren't important. In this case, that means ignoring the vertical and horizontal spokes of a rotating wheel. 7. Horizontal vertical. Have you ever looked at a set of parallel lines and then noticed that one line seems to be slightly lower than the other? This is called the horizontal vertical illusion, and it happens because our brains have a hard time judging distances. When we look at two parallel lines, our brains assume that they're the same distance apart. But because our eyes are slightly different heights, they see the two lines from slightly different angles. Because of this, the brain assumes that the top line is actually lower than the bottom line. The horizontal vertical illusion can also happen when we look at buildings or roads. If one side of the building or road seems to be slightly lower than the other, that's because our brains are assuming that they're the same distance away. But because our eyes are slightly different heights, we're actually seeing the two sides from slightly different angles. Because of this, the brain assumes that the top side is actually lower than the bottom side. Number 6. The moving dots illusion. If you stare at the center of this image for a few seconds, you'll notice that the dots in the background start moving. The dots seem to move either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on which direction you're facing. This is called the moving dots illusion, and it's a great example of how our brains try to make sense of the world around us. When we see a set of random dots, our brains try to find a pattern. In this case, our brains find a pattern by assuming that the dots are moving in a circle. Once we've assumed that the dots are moving in a circle, our brains can predict where each dot will be at any given moment. So the dots seem to move smoothly and predictably. The moving dots illusion is a good example of how our brains use our past experiences to help us understand the present. When we see a set of random dots, we use our past experiences to predict how they might be moving. In this case, we assume that the dots are moving in a circle because we've seen circles move in that way before. Number 5. Impossible triangle. Look at this image. You see a triangle? Looks like there's a triangle in the middle of the image, but if you look closely, you'll notice that there isn't actually a triangle there. What you're seeing is the result of an optical illusion. Human brain is a powerful organ that's constantly trying to make sense of the world around us. Sometimes, however, our brain can be fooled into thinking that we're seeing something when we're not. This is what happens in the case of the impossible triangle. Our brain is trying to make sense of the image in front of us. Because of the way the image is constructed, our brain starts to see a triangle. However, because of the way the image is constructed, there's no actual triangle there. You're seeing as the result of your brain trying to fill in the gaps. Your brain is trying to make sense of the image in front of you by filling in the missing pieces. No, for can you see the woman? This picture's a great example of an optical illusion. At first glance, it looks like there's a woman standing in the middle of a forest. But when you look more closely, you'll realize that there's no woman in the picture at all. The image is simply a trick of the light. It's the way the light reflects off the trees in the background creates the illusion of a woman standing in the forest. No. 3. The spinning dancer. When you look at this image, it may appear as a woman who is spinning in a circle. However, when you look closer, you'll realize that the image is actually a man who is spinning in a circle. The reason for this illusion is because the image is ambiguous. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of what we see. When presented with an ambiguous image, our brains will often try to fill in the blanks. In this case, our brains will often try to fill in the blanks by assuming that the dancer is a woman. This is because we typically associate dancing with women rather than men. However, once we realize that the dancer is actually a man, the illusion is broken. No. 2. The mirage. Mirages are a well-known optical illusion that occurs in hot climates. They can often be seen on roads where the air above the road is heated by the sun. This creates an illusion in which a person or object appears to be reflected in the road. Mirages are a great example of an optical illusion because they are completely real but also completely fake at the same time. The mirage is a real physical phenomenon that occurs when light is refracted by a change in temperature. However, the image that is created is not real. It is a reflection of the sky or surroundings. No one, the stairs. Have you ever seen a set of stairs that seem to go up and up forever? This is called an infinite staircase, and it's a great example of an optical illusion. Infinite staircases are created when the steps of a staircase are made to be shorter and shorter as they go up. This creates an illusion in which the stairs never end. In fact, there is always one more step above you no matter how far you climb. Infinite staircases are a fun optical illusion that can be found in museums and other public places. They're also a popular subject for movies and TV shows. What did you think about these optical illusions? Which ones did you find the most interesting? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.